Part 1. The first time I saw Eliza, she was standing under the awning of a shut bakery, holding a paper cup with no coffee in it, keeping it for the warmth it had stopped giving an hour before. It was raining the way it rains when the year has decided to end early. Cold, thin, personal. She was not asking anyone for anything. That was the first thing I noticed about her, and I notice a great deal. She had a good coat gone bad, the kind that used to belong to a life with heat in it. Her shoes were wrong for the weather and right for a job she no longer had. She was 19, maybe 20, and very carefully not crying. I told my driver to wait. I got out under the same awning, close enough to talk, far enough to be ignored if she wanted it. "The bakery's closed," I said. "Closed at 6. "I know," she said. "I'm not here for the bakery." "What are you here for then?" She looked at me, and there was nothing soft in it, only arithmetic. "Somewhere with a roof that doesn't charge by the hour," she said. This was the nearest one still standing. I have met a great many people who wanted something from me. She was the first in a long time who told me the truth about it in one sentence and did not dress it as a story. I liked her at once. I want to be honest about that because it matters later. "I have a house," I said, "with more rooms than I use and a kitchen nobody cooks in." "That's a strange thing to say to a stranger in the rain," she said. "I'm a strange man," I said. "Ask anyone I pay." She did not come that night. She was far too smart for that night. She wrote the name of my company on the inside of her wrist with a pen that was dying, and 3 days later she walked into my lobby dry, upright, and ready to earn whatever she took from me. I gave her a room. Then I gave her a tutor because she was quick and it would have been a waste not to. Then I gave her a desk because she asked for one, and she asked for it the way other people ask for a name. For a while, when people asked, I said she was like a younger sister to me. It was even true. I had no family that would sit at a table with me. She would. She learned my coffee before she learned my business, and in the end, she got both right. She teased me about the paintings I don't hang and the calls I don't take. She reorganized my study without permission and improved it. She had a laugh she tried to keep behind her teeth and mostly failed to. 3 years of it. I remember all of it. I remember the day she signed her employment contract. She read every line first, out loud, slowly, because she said only fools sign what they haven't read. I told her it was the smartest thing anyone had said in that building all year. I meant it. It stayed true for 3 years. The winter she arrived, she was afraid of the quiet in the house. She had grown up somewhere loud, and a still room read to her as a place where something was about to go wrong. So she filled it. She talked to the plants. She named the coffee machine. I let her. There was a man across the city who had sent her, though I am getting ahead of myself. And she did not know that I knew his name, and he did not know I had known it since before she wrote my company on the inside of her wrist. His name was Arthur Vance. We had been what the trade papers like to call rivals, which is a courteous word for a man who once tried to take everything I built and would gladly try again. He believed he already had me measured. He had me watched. He had me, he was sure, understood. That was his one real talent, Vance. Being understood was how he ate people. He would learn the exact shape of a man's want, then become the person who could fill it, and by the time you noticed, you were already inside him. He had done it to better men than me. He sent Eliza because he could not picture a lonely rich man who would not, sooner or later, need someone at his table. He was not wrong about the loneliness. He was only wrong, catastrophically and across 3 unhurried years, about what I would decide to do with it. Here is the part where the story is supposed to break your heart. The kind man takes in the cold girl, gives her a life, a name, a chair at his table, and never once suspects she was sent to take it all back out again. I knew with the first month. I want to be precise because the precision is the whole of it. I did not suspect. I did not have a feeling. By the end of the first month, I knew, the way you know your own signature, exactly who had sent her and exactly what she had been sent to do. And I kept her anyway. I gave her the tutor and the desk and the coffee lessons and the reorganized study, knowing all of it. And I meant every kind thing I did, and not one of them was an accident. Both of those are true. I have had 3 years to make my peace with both, and I have. She made the coffee too strong that first winter. I never mentioned it. We had, even then, a great deal to do. That was the only lie in the whole arrangement, and it was mine, not hers. A man is allowed one. So the title of this, if it had one, would be a lie. I did not raise a girl for 3 years not knowing she was sent to destroy me. I raised her for 3 years knowing exactly that. It changes the story. I am aware of it. I have decided, on the whole, that I don't mind. So, if you came here for someone who got fooled, I am sorry. That man is more comfortable to watch. He is not me. I am the other kind. The kind who sees the knife on the first day and sets the table around it and pours the wine himself. You will want to know why. Why a man who knows he is being robbed hands the thief a key, a room, and 3 years of his life. That is the right question. It is the only one. And it is not one I'm going to answer yet, because she did not get the answer for 3 years either. It seems only fair. That morning, the one I am telling you this from, I sat at my kitchen table with a newspaper I had already read and a cup she had already made. I listened to her humming down the hall as she got ready for a day of quietly betraying me, and I turned a page. It was, in most respects, a very good morning. The coffee was very good. She had finally learned. People do learn if you give them long enough, and I am, whatever else you decide about me by the end of this, a man who gives people exactly long enough. Stella Lee found it before I told her to look. That is the difference between Stella and every other person I have ever employed. She does not wait to be pointed at a problem. She smells it, and then she brings it to you already labeled and dated. She came into her own office, where I was waiting, and closed the glass door behind her, though the whole floor was empty, and set a folder on the desk between us. She did not sit. Stella presents standing. She believes sitting makes people soften a conclusion, and she is usually right. 3 weeks, she said. The new one. Eliza. What about her? She's been in the document server 4 times, after hours, categories she has no business inside, client files, supplier terms, the old acquisition folders. Show me, I said. She turned the folder and opened it with one finger. Access logs, neat columns, times, file names, a small flag beside 4 of the rows in a red she keeps for things she is certain of. Stella is not certain often. When she is, it is worth more than most people's evidence. Discipline's here, she said. 1 in the morning, 2:15. She is careful. She doesn't linger. She doesn't copy in bulk. She opens, she reads, she leaves clean. Someone taught her how to look like nothing at all. Someone did, I said. 2 houses before this one, Stella said. I made calls. 8 months with a shipping family in the north. A textile fortune before that. Both had a quiet, bad quarter she could not have caused and never once got blamed for. She is clean on paper, cleaner than clean. That is, the tell. You checked her, I said. The morning after her first night here, Stella said, you took a girl off a wet street and handed her a key and called her a project. One of us was going to have to be a professional about it. It was never going to be you. Behind her, on the wall screen, a live dashboard sat open on a column I had asked her to build the week Eliza arrived. A single line ran across the top of it. Transmission receipts, auto capture, on. Neither of us looked at it. We did not need to. It was already doing its one quiet job. I can walk her out today, Stella said. No scene, no reference, no reason given. She's a probationary hire. It's a Tuesday. By Wednesday, she was never here. She waited. This is the part where an ordinary man reacts. Do you want coffee? I said. Stella looked at me. She has a specific look for when I have said a thing she cannot immediately file. It lasts about a second. She spends it, and then she moves on, because Stella does not waste the second look on a man who is not going to explain himself. No, she said. I'll take that as a no. It's a no, Marcus. Understood. Inside, where the house gets no vote, I thought, she did not want coffee. She wanted me alarmed. The coffee offer was genuine. I have excellent coffee. It seemed a waste of a morning to spend it on panic. She stays, I said. Stella did not blink. She is feeding him everything she touches, she said. I know. Then she stays for what? For everything she touches, I said. You are going to give her things to touch. She understood before I finished the sentence. That is why I tell her things in half. The data, she said. Ours to design, I said. Nothing real. Not one true number leaves this building through her. Whatever she carries out, we write first. Stella did not nod. Nodding, for her, is a kind of applause, and she does not applaud a plan she has not yet tried to break. Instead, she reached over, pulled a fresh tab, wrote a label on it, and slid it into the folder. She had opened the file before I said yes. You understand what you're buying, Stella said, and for the first and only time that morning she looked at me instead of the folder. 3 years, maybe more. A person in this building every day who is here to take you apart. Birthdays, the holidays, you will teach her things. You said sister to the accountant last week. I heard you say it. I did, I said. And you meant it, she said. It was not a question. I did not answer it, and she did not press, and that was the only crack either of us put in the whole clean surface of the morning. She let it close. So did I. You had that ready, I said, meaning the folder. I had it ready in week 2, she said. I was waiting to see how long it took you to catch up. And? You're slow in the mornings, she said, but you got there. That, from Stella, is a love letter. I let her keep the last word. She had earned it a fortnight early. I stood. The dashboard behind her kept its small green light. 3 floors down, a young woman I genuinely cared for was learning the shape of a machine that would spend 3 years unmaking the man who sent her, and she believed she was winning. So did he. That was the arrangement, and it suited us both perfectly. I finished my coffee and went back upstairs to work. That evening, 3 floors down, after the lights on her corridor had dropped to standby and the building had gone to that hum a tower makes when it thinks it is alone, Eliza sat at her desk and did the thing she had come to the city to do. She was not nervous. This is important, and it is the truth. She did not creep or glance over her shoulder or wet her lips the way liars do in the stories. She opened the files she had chosen that week, read them the way she read everything, once and completely, and built her report. Her hands were steady on the keys. She had done this in 2 other houses before mine, for other people, and walked out of both clean. She was good. I want that on the record. He did not send an amateur. He sent someone who deserved a better employer, which is its own small tragedy, though neither of them would ever have called it one. She folded the week into a single message the way she had been taught. No names in the clear, no feeling anywhere in it. Only what she had seen and where it lived and what it might be worth to a man across the city who paid her in installments and called her, when he called her anything at all, the asset. The man who received her reports was not the man who paid for them. There was a handler in between, a careful voice on a clean line who never used a name and never once asked how she was. She preferred it that way. A job with no faces was a job you could set down at the door and leave there. She had rules for herself. She did not take small things from the houses she was placed in. She did not read the private letters that had nothing to do with the work. She did not let herself like the people. That last rule was the only one she had ever broken, and she had broken it here, quietly, and told no one, least of all herself. She read it back once, then she sent it. It left her screen and went out into the dark toward the person waiting for it, and it felt, to her, like nothing. Like closing a drawer on a room you have finished tidying. What she did not see, 3 floors up and 1 wall over, was a green line on a screen in an empty office climbed by 1. A new entry wrote itself with no hand near it. Access event, number 142 in the morning. Documents transmitted. Capture complete. She did not know her message had been read twice before it reached the man it was for. She did not know that the copy traveling to him was not the copy she had sent. She knew none of it and had no reason to, and that absence of reason was the entire design. Across the city in the morning, the handler would open her report and pass it upward, and Arthur Vance would read it over breakfast and feel one more time the small, clean pleasure of a thing going precisely to plan. He was right to feel it. It was going precisely to plan. It simply was not his plan, and it never had been. She closed the laptop, and then she sat a moment in the dark with her hand flat on the lid, not moving, looking at nothing. 1 beat longer than a person sits who has merely finished her work. Only a beat. Then it passed, and she gathered her coat and went home, and she slept well, because she had not yet done anything she would have to lie awake over. Upstairs on my kitchen table, the newspaper lay folded where I had left it. I had read it that morning. I would read the next one tomorrow. It is a very ordinary thing, a newspaper on a table, and I want you to remember that you saw it there, because it is not a prop, and by the end you will know exactly what it was for. The report was filed. The logger added its line, and a man who knew everything went to bed early and slept as well as she did. Some of you will decide that is the coldest thing in this whole story, and some of you will understand it completely, and I honestly cannot yet tell you which of you is right. Part 2. Arthur Vance read the first report the way other men eat a good breakfast, slowly, with pleasure, certain it had been prepared for him by someone whose whole purpose was to please him. His office was the kind of room built to make visitors feel provisional. Too much floor, too much window, a desk you could have landed a small plane on, with a single batch of printed pages set precisely in the middle of it. His aide stood off to one side, the way aides do, learning to be furniture. Vance liked furniture. He liked a room that agreed with him before anyone in it had spoken. "Here," Vance said, turning a page. "The Eastern supplier. He's pulling back from it. Third column. See the drop?" "Noted," the aide said. "That's the Thorne I know," Vance said, cautious to the point of paralysis. The aide wrote it down. Vance circled the number with a slow pen, the way you circle a thing you already own. I was 3 floors and a whole city away, and I did not see him do it, and I did not need to. I had chosen the number in that third column myself, a long week earlier, precisely because cautious men are predictable, and Vance had built an entire religion out of my being cautious. He wanted cautious. I gave him cautious. He found cautious. Everyone left the exchange satisfied. That is the only kind of gift I have ever known how to give a man like Vance, and he has never once refused it. The figure he circled had gained a decimal place somewhere between her screen and his desk. He did not notice. Men do not audit good news. That is not a flaw in Vance. It is a flaw in the species, and I have simply learned to bank on it. He turned another page. He was not gloating. I want to be fair to him, because fairness is cheaper than it looks, and it makes the ending land harder. Vance was not a stupid man. This is the thing people always want to forget about him. To prove it to himself, he set my pages down and picked up another file entirely, one that had nothing to do with me. "Delacroix," he said to the aide. "The logistics group. They've overextended in the east. 2 quarters, no more, and they crack. Move nothing yet. Just watch them." He was right. That is the part that matters. 6 months later, Delacroix would crack exactly on his schedule, and everyone who worked for him would remember that he had called it to the week. His eye was real. His instinct was real. He could read a room he was allowed to see. His only blindness was the one room he had decided he already owned. He could audit a stranger down to the decimal. He could not audit a gift. And I had spent a great deal of care making sure that everything he received from my house arrived wrapped, exactly, as a gift. "Thorne is retreating," Vance said, coming back to my pages, settling the matter for the room. "There it is, in his own numbers." He leaned back. He was pleased in the specific way of a man watching a plan unfold as designed. "Pour us something," he told the aide. "The good one." The aide poured. Vance took the glass and did not toast anything, because you do not toast a certainty. You simply drink to it. He sat in his enormous chair in his enormous room and felt the clean, private pleasure of a man who has an inside source and a rival who does not know it. He was correct about all of it except the direction. There was an inside source. The rival did not know. The pleasure was entirely real. It was simply pointed the wrong way down the table, and he would go on drinking to it, warmly, for the better part of 3 years. He set the glass down and picked up his phone. "Get the board together," he said. "Next week. I want to move on something." Then he sat a moment longer with my pages, my numbers, my decimal, and my cautious, and he was, I am told, smiling. I would have liked to see it. I settled for imagining it. I have a good imagination. I have had time to develop one. That evening, I went to a reception I had no reason to attend, in order to be seen by people who had decided I was finished. It was not a gala. Our industry does not do galas on a Tuesday. It was the smaller kind of event, a room of good suits and warm wine, where careers are quietly repriced over canapes by people who will deny having done it. I came late and greeted no one. I have found that the surest way to confirm a rumor that you are fading is to arrive at a party and behave like a man with nowhere left to be. So I did that. I got a drink. I stood near a window. I let the room have me. It did not take long. It never does. Two younger executives had positioned themselves by the canapé table, the way ambitious men do, near the food and near the door, and they were discussing the market, which meant they were discussing who was over and who was not. "Thorne?" one of them said, not lowering his voice, because I was not, in his mind, in the room in any way that counted. Thorne is probably scared to compete directly at this point. He's just sitting on what he has. You watch. Vance takes the whole eastern lane by spring. I looked at the canapé table. It had been moved since the last of these I attended. Someone had pushed it 3 feet to the left, into the corner, out of the flow of the room, so that people had to go and find it. He's not wrong, I thought. I did move the table. I took a canapé. It was adequate. I moved on. Behind me, the other one laughed and added that the quiet ones always fold last, and that you could measure how finished a man was by how little he bothered to defend himself. I let him keep the theory. It was a good theory. It was simply about a different man than the one he thought he was describing. I want to be honest about how little I felt, because the honesty is the whole character sketch. I did not feel humiliated. I did not feel the sting a man is supposed to feel overhearing his own funeral. I felt mostly mild interest in the fact that the retreat was landing exactly as designed, in real time, at the food. Vance does not come to these things. He sends representatives, and they come back and confirm to him what he already believes, and he calls that intelligence. He would have a summary of this reception by morning. Thorne present, Thorne diminished, Thorne alone by the window. Good. That was the entire point of my evening. There is a strategy people never suspect because it looks exactly like losing. You let them say it in rooms. You let it travel. You become, in the mouths of junior men near the food, a settled matter. And a settled matter is a thing no one bothers to check. I finished my drink. I did not refill it a second time, because a second drink would have looked like I was staying, and I was not staying. I had been visible for the length of time it takes a room to notice a man and decide he no longer matters. That was the errand. It was done. On my way out, I passed the two executives again. One of them half recognized me now, too late, and I watched a small uncertainty cross his face, the beginning of the thought that he might have said something within earshot he should not have. I gave him nothing to confirm it with. I simply left. Vance would read the summary over breakfast. He would add it to the file he kept on me in his head, the file marked finished. Every man who underestimates you is doing a portion of your bookkeeping for free. I have never seen a reason to interrupt them. Across the city that same evening, Stella added a single printed page to a pile on the corner of her desk. The trade summary of my quiet party. She did not read it twice. She had a system, and the system did not ask her to feel anything about the pages. It only asked her to keep them, in order, with the dates on. The following week, Vance took his certainty into his boardroom and spent real money on it, in front of witnesses, on the record, which is the only place I ever needed him to spend it. His boardroom was the most expensive room in his building, and he sat at the head of it the way he did everything, controlled, unhurried, performing calm for people he had trained never to test it. His aide sat off to the side with the motion papers, waiting, the way the aide always waited, for a sentence worth writing down. "We see a clear pattern," Vance told them, and the pattern was mine. And the clarity was mine. The word "we" was doing its usual work in his mouth, turning a decision he had made alone into something the room had somehow chosen with him. Thorne is pulling back across multiple fronts, the eastern supplier, the adjacent lanes. The intelligence is consistent and it is reliable. He let reliable sit in the air. No one in the room asked where it came from. He had spent years making sure no one in the room, ever, asked where anything came from. "We are positioned to move," he said. "Ridgeway, the adjacent sector competitor, Thorne's soft flank. We acquire, we fold it in, we take the lane before spring." He looked around the table, not for permission, but for the sound of agreement, which is a different thing and the only thing he still needed. He got it. Of course he got it. A board that has been rewarded for years for nodding does not suddenly learn to frown. They noted the decision. They undermined the framing. His aide wrote it all down in the clean minutes that would, in time, read very differently than anyone in that room intended. One man near the far end of the table opened his mouth once, some small question forming about the source of the intelligence, and then he read the room and closed it again and reached for his water instead. Vance saw it. Vance always saw it. He filed the man's silence as agreement, which is the most expensive filing error a confident man can make. Ridgway was a real company, with real staff and real debt, and it was only worth buying if I was genuinely bleeding on that flank. I was not bleeding. I had painted a wound on very carefully and let him find it. He was about to spend a fortune bandaging a thing that was never cut. Across the city, in a smaller and far less impressive room, Stella pulled the Ridgway line off a news terminal the moment it moved. She read it once. She did not react. She pulled a file from her drawer, the file that had begun as a single sheet and was quietly becoming a folder. "We need him to commit," she said to no one, to the empty office, in the flat voice she uses for things that matter most. Not just receive. She wrote a short line on a fresh tab and slid it into the folder and closed the drawer. She did not underline it. Stella never underlines. The people who underline are the people who are not sure. I did not know yet what that distinction would come to be worth, receive against commit, though I would, in time, and so would Vance, in a room with far worse lighting than his boardroom. For now, it was only a line on a tab in a drawer across the city, waiting, the way the important things wait, quietly and without complaint. Back in his boardroom, Vance's aide brought him the final motion paper, and Vance signed it without looking up, without reading it, the way powerful men sign the things they are certain of. It was not the last paper that would matter. It was the first one in a trail he would build entirely with his own hand. That is the part I still find admirable, in a strictly technical sense. I did not have to forge anything. I did not have to plant anything. I only had to make the fabrication look like the truth he already wanted, and then stand back and let him sign and sign and sign. "Tell them the announcement goes out Thursday," Vance said, standing, the meeting concluded, the fortune committed. "And get me the trade desk. I'll give them a few words. Let people hear it from me." He moved Thursday. I was not worried about Thursday. A man had walked into his most expensive room and spent real money defending a flank that only existed because I had drawn it there, and he had done it in front of witnesses who wrote everything down. I had already read the end of that particular chapter. I simply had the patience to let him reach it in his own time. And so, on the Thursday, Arthur Vance gave the trade press a few confident words about his new acquisition and the man he was so sure he was finished with. A reporter wrote them down and printed them, with the date set beside them, exactly where a date does the most damage. He thought he was announcing a victory. He was, in the most literal sense, going on the record. There is a difference. He would learn it. He had the receipts already. He just hadn't read them yet. Part 3. Stella worked late the night the report came in, which is to say, she worked late the way she always did, without urgency, the way a lighthouse keeps its hours whether or not there are ships. Her office was dark except for one lamp and the pale wash of the screen. The pile on the corner of her desk was taller now than it had been in the winter. Paper collects when you keep it in order and never once throw a page away. She opened the compliance dashboard. She did this every night, the way other people check that the door is locked, not because they expect a thief, but because the checking is the thing that lets them sleep. A new line had written itself since the afternoon. She read it without leaning in. Transmission logged. Capture complete. Signature confirmed. Documents attached. Status locked. The word locked sat at the end of the line like a small closed hand. She touched the entry once with one finger, not to change it, only to mark it, the way you touch a name on a list. Then she took her own pen and added a matching line to the ledger she kept by hand, because Stella trusted paper in a way she had never quite trusted a screen. She had worked for Marcus for 12 years. She had said no to more things in that building than any other person alive, and she had been right to, very nearly every time. She was not a woman who was often uneasy. She did not enjoy the feeling and did not indulge it. This was the one operation she had ever told him, once, plainly, that she believed cost him more than he would admit. He had not answered her. She had not raised it a second time. She simply kept the ledger and let the cost be his to carry, since he had insisted on carrying it. That was the whole of her discipline. You did not have to approve of a thing to keep it in perfect order. You only had to be the kind of person who never left a page out of sequence. Stella had been that person since before the girl 3 floors down was born. At the foot of the dashboard, a running total kept its quiet count. Every document Eliza had ever carried out, gathered, dated, and held. The number was not small anymore. Stella did not dwell on it. A number is only a number until the day you need it, and then it is everything. And she intended to be ready for that day and bored by it until it came. Again, she said to the empty room, and it was not a complaint. It was closer to a nurse noting a pulse. Steady, on schedule. Nothing to report except that the thing was still, faithfully, happening. She closed the window. The dashboard went dark. She capped her pen and squared the pile and turned off the lamp on the left. She left the one on the right burning, the way she always did, because a room that is never entirely dark is a room a careful person can come back to at any hour without fumbling. This is what 3 years look like from the inside. Not a plan being sprung. A woman in a quiet office, keeping the dates in order, adding a line, going home. The drama people imagine is loud. The real thing is a ledger and a lamp and someone patient enough to keep both. Nobody makes a film about the second kind. That is precisely why it works. People think revenge is a moment, a door kicked in, a truth flung across a crowded room. It is not. Revenge, the kind that holds, is an administrative act. It is a woman keeping receipts. It is a man having eggs. It is 36 months of ordinary Tuesdays, each one filed, none of them wasted, and at the end of them, a single page that a court will read aloud in a flat voice, and the flatness will be the whole of the justice. I did not want a scene. I have never once in my life wanted a scene. A scene is a thing you stage when you do not have the paperwork. When you have the paperwork, you can afford to be quiet, and being quiet, it turns out, is the loudest thing a patient man can do. Somewhere across the city, a young woman was asleep, believing she had sent a private message into the dark. She had. It had simply been read and copied and filed and locked by the time she reached her own front door. Stella knew this. Stella had built the machine that knew it. She went home and slept as well as anyone in this story ever did. Eliza found the book on her desk the next morning, and it took her a moment to understand that it was hers. It was a paperback, second-hand, the corners soft with someone else's reading. The title was The Salt House. She had mentioned it once, weeks ago, over breakfast, the way you mention a thing you loved as a child and have never gone back to find. She had not thought he was listening. He had been behind his newspaper. He had not looked up, had not answered, had said nothing at all about it, and she had let the sentence go the way you let go of most sentences at a breakfast table, expecting it to land nowhere. She could even remember the morning she had said it. Gray light, the good jam, some story on the radio about a storm out at sea. She had said, without deciding to, that there was a book she had loved as a girl about a house the tide cut off twice a day. She had lost her copy in one of the moves, she'd said, and she thought about it sometimes. Then she had changed the subject at once, because you do not hand people the soft parts of yourself in houses like this one. You keep them in the moves, with the rest of what you cannot afford to carry. And here it was. Not wrapped, not left with a note, not handed to her with a look that asked to be thanked. Simply set on her desk, in the ordinary morning, where a thing appears when someone wants you to have it and does not want anything back. She picked it up. She read the cover. She turned it over and read the back, though she already knew the story, had known it for years, was only reading it now to have somewhere to put her eyes that was not the strange, soft weight of the fact of it. No one had asked him to remember. That was the part her mind kept circling and could not file. A note she could have filed. A performance she could have set beside all the other performances she had catalogued in 3 houses. But there was no performance here to catalogue. There was only a book, and the fact that he had heard her. She told herself it meant nothing. He did this for everyone, probably. Rich men who are lonely collect small kindnesses the way other men collect watches. It makes them feel like the good version of themselves. It was management. It was a habit. It was nothing about her at all. She did not fully believe it, and she noticed that she did not, and the noticing annoyed her more than the book did. She had a rule about the people. She did not let herself like them. It was the cleanest rule she owned, the load-bearing one, the rule that had walked her out of 2 houses without a scratch on her. and a second-hand paperback, face down on a desk with no note attached, had just leaned on that rule harder than anything had in years. She could feel it give, very slightly, the way old wood gives a moment before you hear it. She did not like the sound it was not quite making. So she did the only thing there was to do with a feeling she had no shelf for. She opened her desk drawer, and she put the book inside it, face down, and she slid the drawer shut. And she did not open it again. She turned to her screen. She opened her email. The cursor blinked in the empty field, patient, waiting for her to become the version of herself that had a job to do. The report she would file that evening was already half written in a folder only she could see. She began her day. The drawer stayed closed. That, for now, was enough. 3 floors up, I already knew about the book, because I was the one who had put it there. I want to be precise about the thing I did, because it is small, and it is the whole of me. I remembered. I did not mention it. Those are different things, and the difference is the only weapon I have ever really trusted. A mentioned kindness asks to be repaid. A remembered one just sits there, quietly, being true, until the person it was done for cannot decide what to do with it. I did not need her to thank me. I needed her to have nowhere to put it. She didn't. Good. The next morning she made the coffee too strong, and I knew from the first sip that she had filed the night before. I want to be honest about how I knew, because the honesty matters more here than the cleverness. I did not know because she made the coffee strong. I knew because a line had written itself on a screen at 1 a.m, and I had seen it before she had poured a single cup. The coffee only told me something I already had in writing. But the coffee was interesting anyway. She always made it a shade too strong on the mornings after, without meaning to, without knowing she did it. The body keeps a worse secret than the mind. Hers confessed at the grinder every time, and she never once heard it. I did not look up when she came in. I had my newspaper. I have found that a newspaper is the most honest thing a man can hold, because it lets you look at nothing while you watch everything, and no one has ever once been afraid of a man reading the sports. "Did you sleep?" I said to the paper. "Fine," she said. She sat. Her hands went around her cup the way cold hands go around a cup, though the kitchen was warm. She was waiting for the second question. She was always waiting, those mornings, for the question underneath the question. I turned a page. "You made the coffee stronger than usual," I said. I did not look up when I said it. There is no version of that sentence that is safe, and I let her sit inside all of them at once. It is either a husband's small remark or the sound of a man who knows exactly what she did at 1 a.m. She could not tell which. That is the entire art of it. She had no answer. There is no answer. "Sorry," she said finally, which is what people say when they have been asked a question that was not a question. "It's good," I said. "Leave it." And I meant that too. It was good. She had learned. People do. She tried once to make ordinary conversation, which is what frightened people do to prove to themselves that they are not frightened. "The Delacroix thing," she said. "People are saying Vance called it early. Weeks early." "People say a lot of things about Vance," I said. "You don't sound worried about him." "I'm reading the sports," I said. "It's very hard to worry and read the sports at the same time. You should try it sometime." She almost smiled. Almost. Then she remembered what she was, and the almost closed over like a shop at the end of the day. "Pass the salt," I said, because a man who wants the salt is not a man who suspects you of anything, and I have never in my life wasted a prop. She passed the salt. Her hand was steady. She had good hands. She would have been very hard to catch if anyone had been trying to catch her, which no one was. She did. I noticed. I said nothing else. We had eggs. That is the whole of the scene, and I know how little it looks like on the page. A man and a woman and a newspaper and some eggs. But hold what the audience holds. A message read and locked at 1 a.m. A book face down in a drawer 3 floors below. A running total on a screen across the city. And over the top of all of it, calmly, a question about coffee. She finished quickly that morning. She usually did those mornings. She excused herself with something about an early call, and she took her cup to the sink and rinsed it, which she did not always do, and then she was gone down the hall, and the kitchen was exactly as it had been before she arrived. 3 floors below us, in a drawer she had shut on herself, a book lay face down in the dark. She had carried the weight of it up to my kitchen without knowing she had, and set it down across the table from me, and I had watched her not mention it, the same way I had once not mentioned it to her. We are, the two of us, very good at the things we do not say. It is nearly the only thing we have ever truly had in common. I sat with the newspaper a while longer. The logger had added one more line in the night. The drawer downstairs was shut on a book she would not open. Nothing in the house had changed, and everything had, and the only person at the table who could hold both of those at once was the one calmly reading about a game he had not watched. I turned the page. There was no hurry. There has never once, in 3 years, been any hurry. Part 4. Vance ran the meeting at 10 in the morning, in a room brighter than it needed to be, and he did it without notes, because he never used notes in front of his board. Notes, he believed, were for men who were not sure. He stood at the front with his hands loose at his sides and told them what they already wanted to hear, which is the easiest speech in the world to give and the one performers love best. Thorne is retreating, he said, across 3 fronts: the eastern lane, the supplier relationships, the adjacent sector where we are already inside his flank. His board sat and received it. They were good at receiving. He had spent years teaching them the difference between a question that made him look prepared and a question that made him look challenged, and they had all, every one of them, learned it. The acquisition is performing as expected, he went on. The integration is clean, and the pattern is now unmistakable. He let a pause open, the kind a man opens when he has rehearsed the next line in the shower. The Thorne era, he said, is ending. His board nodded. Off to the side, his aide wrote it down, the way the aide wrote everything down, in a small, neat hand, without expression, a man being furniture with a pen. The Thorne era is ending. 6 words, dated, in the minutes, before they were ever in print. I was not in the room. I heard about it the way I hear about everything, later, cleanly, from people whose whole job is to tell me things without opinions attached. But I want to note one thing about that morning, because it told me something useful. He quoted a figure on the 3rd front that I had built specifically for the 3rd year. He was using it in the 14th month. He was a year and a half ahead of his own schedule, running on a number that was not supposed to be true yet, and he did not feel the seam. He was more eager than I had planned for. That is the only kind of surprise Vance ever gave me, and it was always the same surprise. He wanted the ending faster than I was offering it. So I adjusted. When a man is that hungry to be proved right, you do not argue. You simply move the plate a little closer and let him reach. After the meeting, one board member lingered. There is always one. He came up to Vance with a small folder and a smaller voice, and he asked, carefully, about one of the projections, the way a man asks a question he already suspects he will be sorry he asked. The 3rd front number, the man said. It doesn't quite reconcile against the public filings. I ran it twice. Vance smiled. It was a patient smile, a teacher's smile, the smile of a man who has an answer so complete it doubles as a door closing. Thorne conceals things, he said. That is the whole methodology. We read the pattern, not the declared number. Right, the board member said. Of course. And he nodded, and he put his small folder back under his arm, and he left, having been given permission not to think about the one true thing he had noticed. Vance watched him go, entirely satisfied. He had just talked his most careful man out of his single most valuable instinct, and he counted it as management. That is the thing about the smart ones. They do not fail because they cannot see the seam. They fail because they build a reason not to look at it, and then defend the reason more fiercely than they would ever have defended the truth. Vance had reasons for everything. That was precisely the problem. A stupid man might have gotten frightened and checked. Vance was far too intelligent to check. The aide finished writing and closed his book. I have come to think of that aide as a kind of court stenographer at a trial no one in the room knew was in session. Everything Vance said, taken down, dated, preserved, in a neat and loyal hand. Vance believed he was keeping a record of his triumph. He was, in the most literal way available, keeping the minutes of his own case. I could not have hired a better clerk for the prosecution, and I did not have to. He was already on a payroll. It simply happened to be Vance's. That detail is the one I still, after everything, find genuinely funny. His aide crossed the room and handed him a folded note. Vance read it and straightened his jacket. Interview, it said. 15 minutes. The trade desk is here. He gave the interview the same day as the board meeting. That is either confidence or theater. I have concluded, after long acquaintance, that with Vance it was reliably both, and that he could not have told you where the one ended and the other began. Neither could I. Neither, I suspect, could God. The journalist was waiting in a clean, neutral room with a recorder already on the table, its small red light patient, and Vance sat down across from it like a man sitting for a portrait he had commissioned himself. He was good at this. I will not pretend otherwise. He was warm about the industry, generous about competitors who posed him no threat, funny in the practiced way of men who have learned that a joke lowers a stranger's guard faster than a fact. The journalist relaxed. Everyone always relaxed around Vance, right up until the moment they should not have. Then the question came, the one he had come for, dressed as though it were the journalist's idea. "And Marcus Thorne?" the journalist asked. "There's talk. What are we seeing there?" Vance let himself consider it, performing thought. "What we're seeing with Marcus Thorne," he said, "is the natural arc of a certain kind of operator. Brilliant for a time, genuinely, and then the market simply moves past them. It isn't cruelty, it's weather." He spread his hands. "I have nothing but respect for what he was." For what he was. Past tense, on the record with the little red light burning. He had buried me in a subordinate clause and not even noticed he was digging. The journalist wrote something down. Vance, encouraged, gave a little more, because a man performing generosity can never resist a second helping of it. "Look," he said, "I hope he lands somewhere good. Advisory work, a board seat somewhere quiet. There's dignity in that. Not everyone gets to choose their exit," he added warmly. "Some men have it chosen for them. There's no shame in it." He meant it kindly, and that was the genius of the man. Vance could bury you and mean the eulogy. He could take everything you had and feel, sincerely, that he had been gracious about it. "Anything you'd like to add?" the journalist asked, closing the notebook, the way they do when the real work is done. And here Vance could not help himself, because ego is a muscle that twitches hardest exactly when the danger has passed. "Tell him," Vance said, easy, smiling, "that Thorne is welcome to call me directly, anytime, if he has concerns." His aide, off to the side, wrote it down without a flicker. The journalist did not react, being a professional, being paid to keep a straight face at exactly these moments. The recorder kept running. The date sat in the timestamp, quiet, permanent, doing the one thing a date is for. No one had asked him to invite me to call. The journalist had closed the notebook. The work was done. He added the invitation himself, freely, as a gift to his own image of himself, and it went into the record with his name on it and the date beside it. Every trap I have ever built, I have built out of exactly that, a man's inability to stop improving on his own certainty once. The room has agreed with him. I read the transcript 2 days later, at my kitchen table, over coffee she had made a shade too strong. I read the part where he invited me to call him directly if I had concerns. I want to give you my complete response to that invitation, in full, exactly as I thought it. I did not call. I had no concerns. I had the transcript. Across the city, Stella pulled the interview off the wire the hour it published, printed it, and slid it into the file behind the board minutes, in date order, the way she filed everything. She did not read it twice. She had already read the only line that mattered, and she had a folder for lines like that, and it was getting full in the pleasant way a folder gets full when a man will not stop signing his own name to things. That same week, Eliza found the envelope on her desk, and the envelope is where the story stops being about Vance for a little while and becomes, quietly, about the cost of being seen. It was a plain envelope, unsealed, sitting square in the middle of her desk where a thing sits when it has been placed and not dropped. There was no name on it. She opened it the way you open something you already know is going to be strange, slowly, giving herself time she did not use. Inside was a single sheet, a medical receipt. It was for a charge she had been carrying quietly in the back of her mind for weeks, the kind of number you do not say out loud, the kind you move from one month to the next and pretend is not following you. She had told no one about it. She was certain she had told no one. The charge was cleared, marked paid, in full with a date. Where the payer's name should have been, there was nothing. A blank. No note beside it. No card, no line, no small claim on her attention that would have let her feel the transaction was a transaction. Just a debt she had been afraid of, quietly gone, by a hand that did not sign. She sat with it. She did not cry because crying was not a thing she let herself do in buildings, and she did not freeze because freezing gets noticed. She simply held a piece of paper and looked at it, and felt the floor of her situation shift a degree under her, the way a floor shifts when you realize the person you are working against has been quietly holding it up. "This doesn't," she said to the empty office, and then she did not finish it, because there was no end to that sentence that left her where she needed to stay. "This doesn't change anything. This doesn't mean anything. This doesn't cost him." She reached for each of them, and none of them held her weight. "He does this for everyone," she told herself, which was the sentence she used now the way a person uses a stair rail on a staircase they no longer trust. "He is a rich man, and it is nothing to him, and it is management, and it is a habit, and it is not about me." She had a whole banister of these by now. She was leaning on all of it at once. What she could not do, standing there, was the one thing that would have made it bearable. She could not make herself believe he had done it in order to own her. Owning her would have been simple. She had been owned before, and she knew the shape of it. She knew the small hooks a benefactor leaves in you so that he can pull on them later when he decides he wants something back. There were no hooks in this one. A clear debt with no name on it does not tell. It only sits in your pocket, warm, being true, asking for nothing at all. It was the one thing in the world she had never learned to defend against. Then she did the thing that mattered, the only thing the scene is really about. She did not put the receipt in the drawer with the book. She folded it once, carefully, and she put it in her pocket. Her hand pressed it flat against her, the way you press a thing you have decided, without deciding, to keep close. And then she opened her laptop. And she prepared the monthly report, the same as every month, the files and the summary and the careful empty language, because the receipt in her pocket had not changed the job, only the weight of doing it. That evening, she sent the report. The receipt was still in her pocket when she pressed send. That is the whole of Eliza in one gesture. She kept the kindness and she filed the betrayal, both in the same hour against the same body. 3 floors up, I already knew she had kept it, because I know how people carry paper, and because a woman who means to throw a thing away does not fold it first. I want to be exact about what I did, because it is the coldest warm thing I have ever done, and I have never once tried to dress it up. I covered the charge. I left no note. A note would have required something of her, an answer, a thanks, a moment where she had to look at me and perform. I was not collecting gratitude. Gratitude is worthless. It evaporates by lunch. I was collecting something far more durable, and I already had it, folded into a pocket 3 floors down, pressed flat against a body that was beginning, at last, to disagree with the job it was being asked to do. People imagine patience is a passive thing, a matter of sitting quietly while nothing happens. It is not. Patience is a long series of very small, very deliberate placements. A book, a receipt, a number moved the width of a plate closer to a hungry man's hand. Each one costs almost nothing. Each one lands exactly where it will do the slow work. I was not waiting for Eliza to break. That is the part people never understand. I was building the seam she would one day break along, quietly, over years, and paying for it myself, out of my own pocket, one small true kindness at a time. Down in her office, the report went out into the dark. The logger wrote its line. Stella, at her desk, added one more entry to the running total and squared the pile and left the right-hand lamp burning. And in a pocket, over a heart that had started keeping a worse secret than the mind above it, a folded receipt began the long journey it would not finish until the last page of this, in a doorway, in her hand, with nowhere left to put it. The CFO asked for the meeting himself, which was the first thing that should have told Vance something, because no one asks Arthur Vance for an unscheduled meeting to deliver good news. He came in with a single folder and the careful walk of a man who has rehearsed a sentence and is no longer sure he wants to say it. He was not a coward. I want that established, because the scene only works if you understand that the one man in Vance's building who saw it clearly was also the one man too disciplined to look away. "I need 10 minutes, the CFO said. 10 minutes and then you can tell me I'm wrong." "You're rarely wrong," Vance said, not looking up. "That's why I pay you to be dull." "Then hear the dull thing." He set the folder on the desk and opened it and turned it so Vance could read. The intelligence data set. The Thorne material. I ran it against the public filings, twice. There are inconsistencies, not large, but they don't reconcile. The numbers we're acting on don't match the numbers the market can see. Vance read it. This is the part people forget when they tell the story later, the part that makes it a tragedy instead of a joke. He did not wave it away. He read it. His eyes went down the page, careful, intelligent, the eyes of a man who genuinely knew how to read a column of figures and had built an empire doing exactly that. The CFO waited while he read. He did not fill the silence. He had learned, working for Vance, that the space after a fact is where the fact does its work, and that a man who keeps talking only hands the other one time to build a way out. So he let Vance read, and he watched him read, and he saw the exact moment Vance's face chose the answer before his mouth did. You ran it twice, Vance said. Twice. Same result both times? Same result. Vance nodded slowly, and, for one moment, one single moment, the whole story could have gone a different way. He had the truth on his desk, in his own CFO's careful hand, and the intelligence to understand it. Then he closed the folder. Thorne hides things, he said. That's the point. That's the whole methodology. His declared numbers never match his real ones. That's not an error in the intelligence. That's Thorne. We read the pattern, not the number he wants the market to see. He slid the folder back. Trust the source. Trust the source. He said it easily, the way you say a thing you have said to yourself many times in the dark and found comforting. And it was, I think, the most expensive sentence of his life, because the source was the trap, and he had just named his own undoing as the reason to keep walking into it. The CFO did not argue. That is the mark of the truly careful man. He knows the exact moment argument becomes a waste of a career. Instead, he took out his pen and he wrote something down, one short line, in his own notebook, not the folder. He did not show it to Vance. He simply wrote it and closed the notebook and put the pen away. Can I ask what the source is? The CFO said, at the door, not turning round. It was the only real question in the room, and he asked it the way you ask a thing you already know you will not be told. A reliable one, Vance said. That's all you need. That's all I'm getting, the CFO said. Yes, Vance said, without unkindness. And the CFO nodded, because a reliable source with no name is the oldest ghost in this business, and he had watched what it did to men before, and he could not make Vance see it, for the simple reason that Vance was the one holding the candle. This goes nowhere, Vance said. We're committed. The acquisition is closing. I'm not reopening a settled question over a rounding argument. Understood, the CFO said. He stood. For the record, though, you've heard my concern. For the record, Vance agreed, almost warmly. Noted and overruled. Thank you for being thorough. The CFO left. The door closed. And Vance, alone, did a thing I would have paid to watch, though I only heard of it. He did not pour a drink. He was not yet a man who drank in the daytime. He simply rested his hand on the closed folder for a moment, flat, still, the way you rest a hand on a thing you have decided not to open again. Then he put it in a drawer, and he did not read it again. Whatever the CFO wrote in his notebook that afternoon is in a drawer somewhere too, in a different building, with a copy behind it, because that is how careful people survive working for confident ones. They keep the note. They date the note. They say, for the record, out loud, so that later there will be a record and a witness that they made it. I never met the man. I have always been rather fond of him. The CFO was right. Vance knew the CFO was right, in the specific way that means a man will die before he admits it. He had too much committed to the correctness of the source. To grant the CFO his 10 dull minutes would have meant granting that every decision of the last year had been built on sand, and there is no intelligent man alive with the stomach for that arithmetic. So he did what intelligent men do. He built a reason. That is the thing nobody warns you about the clever ones. They do not fail because they are fooled. A fool can be fooled, and then, being a fool, can stumble into the truth by accident. The clever man is far safer prey. He will construct an elegant, airtight, genuinely brilliant argument for why the thing frightening him is nothing at all. And then he will defend that argument to the grave, more fiercely than he ever defended anything that was true. Vance had a reason for every wrong turn. The reasons were good. That was precisely what made each one fatal. That same evening, across the city, Eliza's phone rang, and it was the voice with no name, and it wanted more. She answered on the second ring, the way she always did, in the flat professional register she kept for that one number. Yes? The handler was courteous, as he always was, in the way of men who have never once had to look at the person they are handling. He explained, pleasantly, that there was a new category they needed. Tighter, more specific. The old material had confirmed the picture. Now they needed to confirm a position before a certain matter closed. Okay, Eliza said. He gave her the specifics. Which folders? What depth? The kind of access she had been careful, until now, not to touch, because it was the kind that leaves a shape behind it. Yes, she said. He asked if that was understood, if there would be any difficulty. I understand, she said. No difficulty. He thanked her, warmly, the way you thank a machine that has performed. Then he was gone, and the line was dead, and the flat was very quiet. She set the phone down on the table, and then she did the thing the whole scene is about, which is nothing. She sat. She did not move. Her hand drifted once toward her pocket, toward the folded receipt she had carried there for weeks, the small, warm proof that someone in her life had asked nothing of her. Her fingers got halfway. Then they stopped and came back and lay flat on the table instead, because whatever comfort was in that pocket did not belong in the same room as the call she had just taken. She sat like that a long time, not crying. She did not cry in flats any more than she cried in buildings. Just still, in the specific way of a person doing the arithmetic she has been refusing to do, and getting an answer she cannot use, and setting it down again. There was a category of things she had promised herself she would never touch, because touching it was the difference between spying and something with a harder name. She had just agreed to touch it. She told herself it was the last set. She had told herself that before. She had a word for what she had been in the 2 houses before this one. It was a clean word. Corporate. Almost respectable if you did not hold it up to the light, and she had trained herself never to hold it up to the light. The new category did not fit under the clean word. The new category had a courtroom somewhere inside it, faint but real, the way a shell has the sea in it. She knew that. She agreed anyway. Because the only thing worse than going forward was the sum she would have to add up if she stopped, and she was not ready to add it up. She was, in this one thing, exactly like the man across the city she had never met, the one who would not reopen a settled question over a folder on his desk. They were both protecting a number by refusing to look at it. They would each have hated to know how alike that made them. Then she opened her laptop, because the report does not file itself, and denial is a kind of motion, and motion was the only thing that got her through the evenings now. In the morning, she would go into the new category and take what the voice had asked for, and it would be captured, dated, and locked the moment she touched it, the same as everything else, in a system she did not know existed, built by a woman she had never really spoken to. She did not know any of that. She knew only that she had said the last set and did not believe herself and could not stop. 3 floors up, I already knew about the new category, because Stella's system had told her and Stella had told me, in 4 words, the way she tells me everything. The handler had pushed the timeline up. That happens when a close is coming and they need to confirm a position before the money moves. I had placed material for exactly this phase a long time ago and set it where a more aggressive search would find it. I had been expecting the escalation. I had, in a sense, ordered it from the far end of a very long table. The next day, Stella laid the whole thing on her conference table, side by side, and it was the closest I have ever come in 3 years to feeling the ground move. There were 2 documents. She had them squared against each other on the table when I came in, and she did not say anything because Stella does not narrate a thing that can be seen. On the left, a page from the fabricated dataset, 1 column marked. On the right, a page from Vance's own acquisition filing, the legal one, the one with his signature somewhere behind it, 1 line marked. Between them, in red, drawn with a single unhurried stroke of a marker, a line connecting 1 number on the left to the same number on the right. The same number. The one I had invented, sitting in the fake intelligence where it had always been a lie, and sitting again in a real legal filing where a man had used it to justify spending real money on a real company in front of real regulators. A fabricated figure, load-bearing inside a genuine transaction. That is not a bad quarter. That is not an embarrassment. That is a specific and prosecutable thing, and it was sitting on Stella's table in 2 colors of ink. She tapped the red line once with one finger. She did not explain it. There was nothing to explain. I read the number on the left. I read the number on the right. I have looked at a great many pages in my life and understood most of them faster than I let on, and I understood this one in the time it takes to read 2 numbers and know they are the same number. I slid the document back across the table to her. "File it," I said. That was all. That is the entire visible content of the most important decision I made in the middle third of this story. 2 words, across a table, to a woman who had already prepared the folder before I sat down. She did not nod. Nodding is applause, and she does not applaud a thing she assembled herself. She simply picked up the folder that had been waiting by her elbow the whole time, the folder she had built one dated page at a time across 3 patient years. I want to be honest about what that folder was, because it is the closest thing in this story to a weapon, and it did not look like one. It was paper. Dates. A number that had turned up in a place it had no honest reason to be. There was no theft in it, no break-in, no clever crime anyone could point to. Every page had been produced by Vance, or signed by Vance, or filed by Vance's own lawyers with his own name at the foot of it. Stella had not stolen a single sheet. She had only kept them, in order, until the order itself became the case. That is the whole of the method, if you want it in one line. The most dangerous thing you can do to a certain kind of man is save everything he was ever proud of. "Do you want to be present?" she said. "For the filing?" "No." "Why not?" "I'll be having a conversation," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "With who?" "With the other problem." And she did not ask again. She never asks again. That is why this has worked for 12 years, and why it would keep working, and why, of all the people in this story, she is the only one I would trust with the ending. The other problem. 3 years of a person at my table, a book in a drawer, a receipt in a pocket, warmth that was real on both sides of a thing that was a lie on one side of it. And I called it the other problem, flatly, to Stella, because there was no smaller way to hold it and still be able to set it down. She understood that too. She understood it better than I did, probably. She had told me once what it was costing me. She never told me twice. I stood. She was already reaching for her phone. She was calling the lawyers before I was out of the room, and she called me to confirm 3 minutes later, when I was still in the elevator. Stella confirms everything, always, out of a discipline so complete that it has quietly become a kind of tenderness. The trap was not sprung that afternoon. Nothing so loud. A folder was picked up. A number sat in 2 places at once. And somewhere across the city, in a room brighter than it needed to be, a man kept an expensive pen in his jacket and did not yet know a simple thing about himself. His own hand had never once hesitated over anything that mattered. That, at last, was the thing that would cost him everything. Part 6. Vance signed the acquisition on a Tuesday at midday in his big, bright office, and he did it with a pen he had bought for exactly this. The documents were spread across the desk, the whole thick weight of them, and his legal team stood in a loose, respectful arc, the way people stand at a christening. They had reviewed every page. They had approved every clause. Their work was done, and now the room was only waiting for a hand. He read the last page. He did not need to. He read it anyway, slowly, because a man does not rush the best moment of his year, and this was the best moment of his year. Ridgeway folded in. Thorne's flank taken. The thing he had been building towards since the first quiet report came in from inside a rival's house. His legal team had done their jobs beautifully. They had structured it, priced it, stress-tested every clause against every regulation that could touch it. Not one of them knew that the single figure their whole justification leaned on had been invented 3 years earlier by the man they were being paid to help destroy. They were good lawyers. Good lawyers check the law. They do not check the arithmetic a client swears by, because why would they, when the client is Arthur Vance, and the numbers came from a source he had staked his certainty on. They validated the shape of the thing. No one was hired to ask whether the ground it stood on was real. Then he uncapped the pen. It was the first time I ever heard about that pen, and it turns out to matter, so I will tell you what I was told. It was expensive, and it was new, and he had bought it 3 years earlier. In the same week, he said a young woman with a good coat gone bad, walking toward a lobby that was not mine. He had bought it to sign the end of me. He had been saving it. He signed. His hand did not hesitate. I want that on the record because it is the whole of him. Other men, at the edge of a thing this large, feel the pen grow heavy. Some small animal part of them reads the drop before the mind admits there is one. Not Vance. His signature went across the line clean and full and unhurried, the confident hand of a man who has never once been wrong in a way he was made to feel. He dated it. He capped the pen. He set it down on the desk beside the signed page, and he looked at the two of them together for a moment, the signature and the pen, not out of doubt, but out of pleasure. He was savoring it. He had earned the right to savor it by his own accounting, and his accounting had never yet been audited by anyone he could not talk out of it. "Send the announcement," he said. His aide made a note. The legal team began to gather their coats. By the end of the afternoon, the announcement was everywhere it needed to be. Vance had taken Ridgeway. Vance had moved on Thorne's flank. The trade press ran it the way they run a coronation, all certainty and momentum, the winner named before the game was called. Somewhere, a younger executive near a canapé table read it and felt he had called it, and was proved right and was entirely wrong. The whole industry agreed that afternoon that Arthur Vance had won. I did nothing to correct them. It is a great convenience being agreed to be finished. It means no one is watching the finished man at all. I had spent 3 years buying that convenience, and it had cost me a great deal more than money. It had cost me every room I walked into as a lesser man than I was. It had cost me the small daily indignity of being pitied by people I could have bought and sold before breakfast. I paid it gladly. A reputation is only useful in the way a coat is useful. There are days you are better served by taking it off and letting the cold make everyone underestimate exactly how warm you are. Vance wore his reputation the way a man wears a title he inherited, as though it were a fact about the weather rather than a thing that had to be earned each morning. That was the difference between us in the end. He believed the world's opinion of him was the truth. I had always known it was only the world's opinion, and that the truth was a quieter thing, kept in a folder, in date order, waiting. And that was the moment, though no one in the room felt it, that Arthur Vance committed a specific and prosecutable crime in his own hand, on his own paper, with a witness on either side of him. Because the filing he had just signed cited, in its justification, by reference, a set of numbers. And those numbers were the ones Eliza had carried out of my house across 3 careful years. And those numbers were not true, and had never been true. And now they were load-bearing inside a real legal document with a real signature and a real date. He had not been handed stolen goods. He had reached into a supply of lies I'd left out for him and used them to move real money and signed his name under the whole arrangement. There is a kind of crime that cannot be done to an innocent man, however you dress him. This was that kind. I could not have made Vance a criminal. No one could have. He had to do it himself, freely, in full confidence, and he had to want it. And he did want it, more than he had wanted anything in years. That is the only reason the whole thing was clean. I did not push him over any line. I want that understood, because it is the part that matters, morally, if any of this matters morally at all. I simply learned where his lines were and made certain that the one thing he wanted most in the world was standing just on the far side of one of them, smiling, holding the door. I was not in the room. I have never once been in the room for the important part. I was at a small table 2 miles away, eating a sandwich, when the man who had spent 3 years and a great deal of money trying to end me reached the exact point I had built for him and put his own name on it. He signed on a Tuesday. I heard about it at 17 minutes past noon. I will tell you how in a moment. The pen stayed on the desk after the legal team left. He did not put it away. It sat there, capped, the ink barely used, the one true thing it had ever written already dry. It would sit on that desk for a long time. The next time it mattered, it would not be a pen anymore. It would be Exhibit A. But that is a later part, and he had a good lunch coming, and I would not want to spoil it for him. He had so few of them left. Stella watched the announcement land on her news terminal the instant it published, and she did not react because she had been waiting for it the way you wait for a kettle you already know is going to boil. She reached into her desk and pulled a folder. She did not search for it because she never had to. It was exactly where it had been for weeks, labeled in her own hand, one tab already reading acquisition filing, signed, waiting only for the world to catch up to a page she had prepared before the ink was wet. She set it on the desk. She picked up her phone. She dialed. I answered on the second ring. I was, as established, eating a sandwich. "He's committed now," Stella said. "We can move." 6 words after 12 years. That is how Stella tells you that a 3-year operation has just crossed the one line it was built to cross. Not a flourish, not a breath of triumph. 6 flat words, the same voice she uses to tell me the parking structure is being resurfaced. I have come to understand that this is what devotion sounds like when it has been sanded down by competence until nothing decorative is left. "Thank you," I said. There was a pause. I ate. She waited, the way she waits, patient as a wall. "Is that all?" she said. "The sandwich is good," I said. She hung up. I want to be clear about that exchange because people always assume there is a code in it, some second meaning under the small words, the way there is in films about clever men. There is not. She has worked with me for 12 years. She knows that I have no useful things to say after thank you, and that filling the silence would only waste both our afternoons. And the sandwich was good. This is not a metaphor. It was a genuinely good sandwich, and I was glad of it, and I told her so, and she hung up, and both of us went back to our work entirely satisfied. The folder she opened held the whole of it, in order. Tab 1, the acquisition filing, signed that morning. Behind it, the fabricated dataset it leaned on. Behind that, the transmission log, every date Eliza had ever sent, every capture, the running total that had climbed for 3 years in a column no one but Stella ever watched. And behind all of it, the oldest page in the file, the one from week 3, the first flag she had ever raised, the morning she walked into my office and told me there was a spy at my table. She had kept every sheet since. That was the entire weapon. She had assembled it the way she did everything, without drama, in date order, a little at a time, for 3 years, waiting for a man to sign the one page that made the rest of them matter. I did not feel triumph. I have been asked about this since, by the very few people who know, and they never quite believed the answer, which is that I felt almost nothing, and what little I felt was closer to fatigue than to joy. A thing I had been carrying for 3 years had shifted, at last, from my side of the table to his. That is not a celebration. It is a man setting down a heavy box and noticing, distantly, that his arms are sore. Across the city, Stella opened the folder to the first tab and began, quietly, to move. The lawyers were already on retainer. They had been for a long time. There was no dramatic call to arms, no speech, no music. There was a woman at a desk with a folder she had built one page at a time, opening it to page 1 and beginning the slow legal work of turning a man's own signature back on him. She would confirm every step with me. She always confirms every step. It is a very good quality, and I have never once had to ask her for it. That same evening, in a smaller flat across the city, Eliza ended a phone call and did not get up from the floor. The call had come during dinner, which she had not eaten. It was the voice with no name again, and it was courteous again, and it was in a hurry now, which was new. A matter was closing. They needed final confirmation of a position, and they needed it fast. And the access it required was the deepest yet, the kind that does not leave a shape so much as a signature. "Yes," she said. "Tomorrow." "I understand." She said each of them in the flat voice, and then the line went dead, and she was alone with the sound of her own refrigerator. She did not sit back in the chair. She slid out of it. Not dramatically, not a collapse, nothing anyone would have called a scene. She simply went down, out of the chair and onto the floor. She sat with her back against the cabinet and her knees drawn up, the way a much younger person sits, the way she must have sat in rooms long before any of this, before the good coat, before the moves, before the houses. Her hand went to her pocket. It found the edge of the folded receipt through the fabric, the small, stubborn shape of it, the one kind thing anyone in her life had done without wanting something back. She did not take it out. She just pressed it, once, from the outside, the way you press a bruise to check that it is still there. Then her hand came away, and she sat on her floor, and she did not move for a long time. She was afraid now. That was the thing that had changed, and she knew it, sitting on the tile. It was not guilt anymore, or not. only guilt. It was the plain arithmetic of a person who has understood finally that she is in too deep to climb out, and that the man she works for has no reason to protect her 1 hour past the moment she stops being useful. She had walked into 2 other houses and out again clean. She was not going to walk out of this one clean. She had known it for a while. Tonight, she let herself feel it, on the floor with the refrigerator humming, and then she folded it up and put it away, because feeling it did not file the report. She thought, sitting there, about the day she had first walked into that lobby, dry and upright, so certain she was the one running the play. She had been good then, sharp, a professional doing a job for a client who frightened her only a little. She could not now name the exact evening the fear had grown larger than the job. It had happened the way the real changes always happen, not in a night, but across 100 small ones. A book in a drawer, a receipt in a pocket, a man who asked her for nothing and noticed everything. She had come to steal from a lonely man. Somewhere in 3 years, she had begun, without ever deciding to dread the day she would have to finish. Eventually, she stood. Her legs had gone stiff. She went to the small table and opened her laptop, and the screen lit her face in the dark room, and she began to prepare the morning's access, the deepest yet, the one with the signature in it. The receipt was still in her pocket. She had not taken it out. She would go in at first light and take what the voice had asked for, and it would be captured and dated and locked the instant she touched it, in a system built by a woman she had never really met, feeding a folder that was already, that very evening, being opened to page 1. 2 miles away, I finished my sandwich. The file was ready. The lawyers were moving. The conversation I had been carrying toward for 3 years now had a date on it, though only Stella and I knew that, and Stella would not have mentioned it if you paid her. There was nothing left to do that evening but the ordinary things. So I did the ordinary things. I read a while. I slept early. The heavy box was on the other side of the table now, and my arms were sore, and the man who would have to carry it had, at last, picked it up himself with a very expensive pen. Part 7. Eliza found the memo on a Thursday in a shared folder she had every right to open, and it is the only document in this whole story that I did not write, design, or plant. I left it where she would find it. That much was mine. Not because I owed her the warning, because the thing was about her, and a person has a right to read what she is to the man she works for, and I had decided a long time before that when the moment came I would not stand between her and that particular sentence. She was working late, the way she often did now, in the flat surviving hours after the building had emptied. She opened the folder to pull a file she needed, and there was a document in it that had not been there that morning, with a name so administrative that the eye slides off it, the kind of name a thing is given precisely so that no one will open it. She opened it because it was there, and because she had never in her life been able to leave a closed thing closed. That, more than anything, was what made her good at the job. It was also, in the end, the thing that finished her at it. It was Vance's. His language, his format, the clean clinical grammar of a man who has never once in his life had to look at the people he moves around a board. Operational asset, it said at the top. Phase 3. And then, further down, in the same even administrative hand, post-completion review, asset disposition, and a window of weeks following the close of the acquisition. Asset disposition. She read the phrase, and then she read it again, and she understood it the way you understand a word in your own language that you have somehow never had to hear about yourself. She was the asset. The disposition was hers. There was a timeline for it, a tidy set of weeks after the deal closed, in which the useful thing would be quietly retired, the way you retire equipment that has done its job. She had spent 3 years believing she had a deal with a dangerous man. A hard deal, a frightening one, but a deal, with 2 sides to it. She had believed that if she delivered, he would keep her, protect her, that there was a floor under her somewhere with his name on it. There was no floor. There had never been a floor. There was a line item, and a disposal window, and a man across the city who thought of her, when he thought of her at all, as a cost to be closed out. She thought of the 2 houses before this one, the shipping family, the textile fortune, the clean exits she had been so quietly proud of. She saw them differently now, in the light of the memo. She had not been clever in those houses. She had been disposed of on schedule, walked out before she could become a liability, and had mistaken her own scheduled removal for an escape she had engineered. Vance had never once let an asset leave on its own terms. She had simply never before been shown the paperwork. And the worst of it, sitting there, was not the cruelty. She could have survived cruelty. Cruelty at least admits you are a person worth being cruel to. This was worse. This was accounting. A charge to be cleared, a period to be closed. 3 years of her one life reduced to the word review. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She had trained all of that out of herself years ago, in rooms harder than this one. She simply sat, very still, reading a piece of her own future in another man's neat administrative prose. And the medical receipt was in her hand. She had not reached for it. That is the part I want you to hold, because it is the truest thing her body ever did. She had not decided to take it out of her pocket. But there it was, unfolded, between her fingers, the one warm thing in her life, the debt a nameless hand had quietly paid, appearing in her palm at the exact moment she learned what she was worth to the man she had chosen over him. The hand knew before the mind would say it. The hand always does. She looked at the receipt. She looked at the screen. 2 pieces of paper, in 2 hands, describing 2 entirely different accounts of what a person is worth. One said asset, to be disposed of. One said nothing at all, and had simply paid, and asked for nothing. She closed the file. She set the receipt on the desk. She looked at it lying there. Then, after a while, she picked it up again, because she could not, it seemed, leave it lying anywhere. And she went home. We had dinner the next evening, and it was at that dinner that she came the closest she ever came to telling me, and did not. It was not a formal thing. It never was between us. I had a brief in front of me, a genuine one, dull and necessary, and I was reading it while we ate, the way people who are comfortable with each other are allowed to read at the table. She had made the meal. She was good at it by now. She had learned that too, along with the coffee, along with everything. She had made the dish I liked without being asked, the way she had started doing months ago. I have wondered since whether that was tradecraft or affection. I have concluded, as I concluded about most things with her, that it was honestly both, braided so tightly together that not even she could have pulled the 2 apart. People are not one thing. That is the whole of what I know about them, after a long life of watching them closely. She fed me well and she filed on me faithfully, and both of those hands were hers, and she was, I think, the only person in the story besides me who could have held 2 opposite true things at once and gone on setting the table. I have been asked since, by the very few who know the whole of it, whether I hated her. It is always the first question, and it is always the wrong one. I did not hate her. You cannot hate a person for being what you knew they were on the day you took them in. The hating is for people who fool you. She never fooled me for a single hour. What I felt for her, across 3 years, had no clean name. It was built out of watching a person be kind to me with one hand while she quietly emptied my house with the other. And I knew, the whole time I watched her do it, that the kindness was every bit as real as the theft. That is the part no one ever believes. That is not forgiveness. I want to be careful here because people always want this to be forgiveness, and it is not. Forgiveness releases a debt. I did not release anything. I collected every last cent of it to the exact figure in a manila envelope on a table at the end. What I felt was only the plain recognition of one complicated person by another. It changed nothing about what I did to her. It only meant that I did it without anger, which, if you have ever been on the receiving end of a thing done without anger, you will know is far worse. It is the one real thing we had in common. Neither of us ever mentioned it. She ate very little. I noticed, the way I notice things, and said nothing, the way I say nothing. The receipt was in her pocket. She had put it there before she came up. I knew its shape against her the way you know a familiar handwriting. She kept touching the outside of the pocket and then stopping herself, a small repeated motion she did not know she was making. Then she set down her fork and she looked at me and she said, "There's something and she stopped. I looked up from the brief. That is all I did. I did not lean in. I did not soften my face into concern or sharpen it into curiosity. I did not say, "Go on," or "What is it?" or any of the small levers a person uses to pull a sentence the rest of the way out of someone. I simply looked up, and I waited, and I let her stand at the edge of the thing and decide. Here is what I want you to understand about that moment, because it is the closest the whole story comes to giving me away, and she was too frightened to read it. A man who does not know his household holds a spy. When that spy stops in the middle of a confession, leans forward. He asks. He cannot help it. The unfinished sentence is unbearable to him. I was not leaning forward. I was waiting, the way you wait for weather you have already seen on the map. It did not matter to me whether she finished. I already knew the end of the sentence. I had known it for 3 years. Nothing, she said. All right, I said, and I nodded once, and I went back to my brief. I will be honest with you about what went through my mind in that pause, because it is the sort of thing I have never been able to say to a living soul and can only say here, flatly, to you. She started the sentence and did not finish it. I noted it, privately, as approximately the 477th time someone in my presence has started a sentence they did not finish. I keep a rough count of these. It is not a useful number. It helps me anyway. I have never told anyone the count is real. It is. I began keeping it years ago, in meetings, when I noticed how many sentences in a powerful room go unfinished, and how much you can learn about a person from the exact place they choose to stop. Most people, when they stop at, "there's something are about to ask you for something and have lost their nerve. Eliza stopped there because she was about to give me something and thought better of it. That is a rarer place to stop and a sadder one, and I filed it accordingly, in the private ledger where I keep the things I will never do anything with. We finished the meal. I asked, at some point, whether the food was all right. She said yes, it was. She had made it well. We sat a while longer in the particular quiet of two people who are each keeping the other's secret without either of them saying so, though she believed only one of us was keeping one. Then she cleared the plates and rinsed them, which she still did not always do, and she said good night, and she went. I closed the brief when she was gone. She had something to say. She chose not to say it. That was hers to choose, and I let her keep the choice, because the choice was the only thing in that room that still belonged entirely to her. I had already heard the sentence anyway. There was nothing in it I could have used, and nothing in it I would have wanted to. Eliza went home and sat at her own table in the dark, and took the receipt out of her pocket, and could not, for the life of her, put it anywhere. She set it on the table. She looked at it. She turned it over, though there was nothing on the back, the way you turn a thing over hoping it will read differently the second time. It did not. It said the same nothing it had always said, and there was no version of it that let her off. It said only that once, someone had quietly closed a debt she was afraid of, and had not signed it, and had not mentioned it, and had never once, in all the months since, made her pay it back in any of the currencies she understood. She picked it up again. She held it in her hand, and she found that her hand did not want to open. She had held things she was afraid of before. Contracts, keys, other people's secrets. She had always been able to set them down when the job required it. She could not set this down. It weighed nothing. That was the terror of it. The heaviest thing she had ever carried was a folded receipt that weighed nothing at all, and she understood, holding it, that she was not going to be able to put it down for a very long time. Possibly not until someone took it out of her hand. She had crossed, sometime between the memo and this table, out of the place where she was still deciding whether to run to the one person who might have caught her. She had gone into a quieter, worse place, where she had stopped deciding and simply waited to see what the closing of the deal would do to her. She was not bargaining anymore. She was waiting. She put the receipt back in her pocket. She pressed it flat against her, once, the old gesture. Then she stood and went to her window and looked out at nothing in particular, at a city that did not know her name and would not have cared to, and she stood there a long time. Across that city, that same week, the CFO did the thing careful men do when they have been overruled once and cannot make peace with it. He wrote a second memo, a formal one this time, addressed and dated, filed where it would have to be seen so that the record would show he had said it twice. Vance received it. He read it, and this time he read it twice, which any careful person will tell you is the tell. A man reads a thing once to learn it. He reads it a second time when some part of him has already begun, against his will, to believe it. He did not answer the memo. He put it in the drawer with the first one, on top of the folder he had decided never to open again. And that evening, he poured his first drink a little earlier than the evening before, and did not notice that he had. That is how these things always start. Not with a decision, with a time that quietly moves. Neither of them could see the other, but the same quiet weather had started to move over both of them at once, and only one of us, watching from a very great distance, could see that it was the same storm. Part 8. The CFO would not let it go, and I have always respected that about him, because letting it go would have been so much easier and so much worse. When his first formal memo went unanswered and vanished into a drawer, he did the thing careful men do when they have decided their conscience is going to cost them their job anyway. He escalated it through the compliance channel, formally, in writing, where it could not be quietly lost. He made it a matter of record. He forced a response. And so, late one afternoon, Vance sat at his desk with a memo in front of him for the third time. This time, he had to answer it in writing, because the channel it had come through required a written answer. There would be a copy of whatever he wrote, kept, dated, filed. That is the whole point of a channel. He read it again. He had read it twice before, a week earlier, alone, when he thought no one was watching him read. He read it a third time now. It did not improve with reading. Good work never does, for the man it convicts. The analysis was cleaner this time, tighter, the inconsistencies laid out in columns a child could follow, the numbers that did not reconcile set beside the numbers that should have. It was, as a piece of work, unanswerable. The CFO had done his job perfectly. That was the tragedy of him. He was too good to be ignored and too junior to be obeyed. He had to know what the escalation would cost him. Men like Vance do not forgive a subordinate who forces their hand and leaves a paper trail doing it. He would be gone within the year, eased out, given a soft title and a hard shove. He knew it when he filed the memo. He filed it anyway. I have thought about that man more than he will ever know. He is the only person in this entire account who did the right thing at a real cost to himself and got nothing at all for it. Not even the small mercy of being believed. History keeps no column for men like that. I keep one. It is a short column, and he is near the top of it. Vance picked up his pen. It was the expensive one, the one he had used to sign the acquisition, the one he had bought 3 years before to sign the end of me. He held it over the memo, and then he set it down again, without writing, and I find that detail almost unbearably telling, because that pen had signed exactly one thing in its life, and he would never again write a word with it. Some animal part of him had decided, without telling the rest of him, that the pen was only for victories, and this was not one. He took up a cheaper pen instead, an ordinary one, and on a separate slip, not the memo itself, he wrote 3 words. Proceed as planned. He signed under them, small, and sent the slip back through the channel. By doing so, he put into the permanent record a document in which Arthur Vance acknowledged a formal warning about the data, and then, in his own hand, chose to overwrite it. There is no better evidence in the world than a man who was warned, in writing, and wrote back that he did not care. He thought he was closing a nuisance. He was signing the second page of his own case. The acquisition had been the first page. He was a diligent author. He would, in time, write the whole book himself, and never once suspect he was not the hero of it. Then he poured a drink. It was 4 p.m. He did not remark on the hour to himself because a man never does on the first afternoon. He simply had a drink at 4, at his desk, in the daylight, for what I am fairly sure was the first time in his professional life, and he told himself it had been a long day, which it had, and would keep being for a while. I was not there. I heard about the memo the way I hear about everything, through Stella, who received a copy of it through the same compliance channel within the hour and added it to the folder without comment. The CFO had sent it formally the second time. That is the whole story of the CFO, in one choice. A man sends a thing formally when he has stopped trying to fix the problem and started trying to survive it. He was protecting himself. He had every right to. I had rather counted on it. I had placed material specifically for his review a long time before, in the 28th month. I did it because a man that careful, handed something that would not reconcile, always ends in the same place. He puts the objection in writing, or he loses his own self-respect. And a written objection, overruled in writing, is worth more to a case than any confession you could ever squeeze out of anyone. A confession can be recanted. A memo, overruled and dated, cannot. He read the memo twice before he answered it. 3 times in the end. That was the new thing. the thing that told me the weather had turned in Vance's office. 2 reads means you already know the answer and you are checking whether you still dislike it. 3 reads means you have started, very quietly, to be afraid of it. This is why I make a point of reading the end of a book before I have finished the book. It spares you the suspense, and suspense, in my experience, is only fear that has not yet found its facts. That night, at 11 o'clock, Vance was still in his office, and for the first time in the whole of this story, his tie was loosened, and he had not noticed when it happened. He was making calls, short ones, directive ones, the calls a man makes when he cannot bear to wait until morning because morning feels, suddenly, like a long way off. One lamp was on. The rest of the big room had gone dark around him. He sat in a small circle of light at the center of a great deal of shadow. It is a thing that happens to powerful men late at night, and they never see it because they are inside the light and cannot see the shape it makes. "Make sure the right people hear the right things," he said into the phone, easy, controlled, almost genial, the voice of a man doing a favor rather than starting a fire. Nothing dramatic, just questions. Is Thorne as liquid as he says? Can he cover his positions if the eastern lane tightens? That kind of thing. Let people wonder. He listened a moment. Good, the right people, you know the ones. He ended the call. He made another after that, and another. The same soft errand each time, dressed a little differently for each listener. To one, it was concern. To another, it was a favor. To a third, it was just a thing he happened to have heard and was passing along because they went back a long way. By midnight, the question would be loose in a dozen good ears. By the end of the week, it would come back to some of those same ears as a fact, the way a rumor does, laundered through enough mouths to lose the smell of the man who started it. He was seeding rumors about my liquidity. It is an old move, and not a stupid one. You cannot always break a man, but you can sometimes make the market break him for you if you can get enough of the right people wondering the right worried thing at the same time. It might even have worked against a man who was actually where I appeared to be. Against a man who had spent 3 years arranging to appear finished, it was only one more call, made late in a loosened tie, into a phone. It did stir something over the following days. A supplier called my office to ask, very politely, whether everything was all right. An analyst downgraded a note. A man I had done business with for years took me to a long lunch and spent the first half of it working up the nerve to ask a question he never quite managed to ask. I answered all of it the same way, which is to say, I did nothing. I paid every invoice early. I let the numbers speak. The one defense against a rumor about your money is to have the money, quietly, and to be in no hurry at all to prove it. The rumor found nothing to feed on. It thinned, and went looking for a truer story, the way rumors do, and it would find one soon enough, though not the one Vance had planted, and not about me. He refilled his glass. It was the second time in the hour. He did not remark on that either. His jacket was over the back of the chair now, and the tie hung open at his throat, and if you had shown him a photograph of himself at that moment, he would not entirely have recognized the man in it, because it was not the man he performed. It was the man underneath, the one the performance had been built all these years to keep off camera. What he could not have known, dialing the next number, was that one of the numbers his calls passed through that night was watched. Months earlier, in the 27th month, I had placed a third-party compliance monitor on a particular exchange, a dull piece of infrastructure, the kind of thing no one thinks about, that does nothing all year but log. It logged his call. A line wrote itself in a system he did not know existed. Call received. The hour. The source traced. The duration captured. He did not hear the small click of it because there was no click. The important machines never click. He sat back in his circle of lamplight with a full glass and a loosened tie and the pleasant sense of a man taking control of a situation. He made another call. That one was logged, too. He poured again. Somewhere across the city, a folder gained one more dated page. And he went on, warmly, at length, for hours, talking directly into the case against himself, in the only sense that would ever come to matter. 2 miles away, at 9:30 that same evening, I was asleep. I had been reading in bed, as I do. I had reached the end of the book. I had read the last page and closed it and set it on my chest. And somewhere in there I had gone to sleep with the lamp still on, The way you do when a day has been ordinary and there is nothing in the next one you are afraid of. I woke once, near 10, the shallow surfacing you do when a light is in your eyes. I did not startle. There has been very little in the last 3 years worth startling for. I picked up the book, found I had in fact finished it, confirmed that the ending was the one I had expected since I had read it a week earlier when I bought it, and I turned off the lamp. I want to put the 2 rooms next to each other because it is the only boast I will allow myself in this entire account. And it is not really a boast, it is only an arrangement of facts. He was making calls at 11. I was asleep by 9:30. I had read the end of the book already. That is not a metaphor. People always want it to be a metaphor. It was a genuinely good book, and I had genuinely finished it, and I slept well, and he did not sleep at all. There is no trick to sleeping the night your enemy stops sleeping. You simply have to have done the work early. All of it, years of it, so that by the time the loud part arrives, there is nothing left in your hands to hold. Vance was awake at 11 because his part was only beginning. Mine had been finished for a long time. I had built the whole thing across 3 years precisely so that on the night it finally mattered, I would have nothing left to do but sleep. That was not laziness, that was the entire point of the design. The man who has to stay up late to save himself is, almost always, the man who left it too late to be saved. Across the city, Stella was still at her desk, because Stella keeps her own hours and answers to no lamp. There was one tab left in the folder, unlabeled, the last one, the one she had left blank on purpose because she is superstitious in exactly one way and will not name a thing before its time. She labeled it now. She wrote the words in her small hand. She slid it into place. Then she squared the whole folder, the 3 years of it, and set it on the very edge of her desk, where the morning would find it first. She closed the overhead light, left the one lamp burning, and went home. There was nothing left in that folder tonight that needed her. She had a lunch reservation she had made 2 weeks earlier for the day after tomorrow at a place she liked, and she intended to keep it. Stella has always understood that the work is not the life. A woman who cannot sit down to a good lunch on the day her 3-year folder goes to the lawyers has not, in any sense that matters, won anything at all. And in a smaller flat, in the dark, Eliza lay awake and did not file anything, because there was nothing left to send. She had done the deepest access already. The well was dry. The useful part of her was, by her handler's own timeline, nearly used up. She lay on her back and looked at the ceiling. Her hand moved, once, from habit, toward the pocket that was not there. The coat was over the chair across the room, and the receipt was in the coat, and her hand found only the blanket. Her fingers closed on nothing. After a moment, her hand dropped and lay still. And she went on waiting for a morning she could feel coming toward her like weather, and could not, any longer, do a single thing to stop. Part 9. The notice reached Vance at 9 that morning, carried in by an assistant who did not yet know what she was carrying, which is the way the largest things always arrive. She knocked. She came in. She set a single printed page on his desk and said something ordinary about it having come by courier, and she left, because there was nothing in her face or her voice to tell her to stay. Vance picked it up. He read it standing. That detail matters, so I will hold on it the way I held on the pen. He did not sit to read it, because when he lifted it, he still believed, out of 3 years of habit, that he was a man to whom bad paper happened at a safe distance. He read to the bottom of the page standing up, and somewhere in the middle of it, that belief quietly died, and by the last line, he was a different man reading in the same suit. A case had been filed. His acquisition named. The data set behind it named. And beside it, a word he had never once applied to his own intelligence in 3 years. Fabricated. His own overrule memo, quoted. His own 3 words, quoted. Proceed as planned. And, listed among the exhibits, in the flat language of a court, a pen. His pen. Exhibit A. He sat down slowly. Not a collapse. Nothing so kind as a collapse. He simply lowered himself into his chair the way a much older man sits, testing the ground on the way down. He set the page on the desk in front of him. He did not speak. There was no one in the room to perform for, and, for the first time in years, nothing he could have said would have changed a single line. The pen was on the desk in front of him, the expensive one, cap still on. It had signed one document in its life and was named, now, in the notice, as the instrument of a fraud. He looked at it for a long moment. He did not pick it up. I think some part of him understood at last what it was, and that a man does not reach for the thing that is about to be entered into evidence against him. So he left it there, capped, between his two hands, and he looked at it, and it looked at nothing, the way objects do, having no opinion about the men who buy them to end other men. He would sit in that chair a long time that morning, I am told, not moving, not calling his lawyers, not doing any of the loud, useful things a powerful man does in the first hour of a disaster. He simply sat and did, at last, the arithmetic he had refused to do the whole way along. The sum his own CFO had begged him to add up, and found, at the bottom of it, a figure with his own name signed under it. There is a particular stillness that comes over a man when he understands that the trap was not sprung on him, but built by him, plank by plank, in good spirits, over years. I had seen it once before, on a different face, a long time ago, when I was younger and it was my face. It is the only thing in this whole business I have never once been able to enjoy. Down the corridor, at the same hour, his board was gathering in the room where he had once said the Thorne era was ending. They took their seats. There was one chair that stayed empty. No one asked about it. No one had to. The notice had reached them too, and a board reads a legal filing faster than it reads anything except a share price. When the hour came, one of them cleared his throat and called them. Meeting to order. They began, without him, to do the one thing a board finally does to a man who has become a liability. They continued, smoothly, in his absence, as though the absence had been the plan all along. His chair was empty before the meeting started. That is the whole of institutional power, in one image. Not a vote, not a knife. An empty chair and a room that has decided to go on without turning to look at it. And by mid-morning, out in the wider world, a thing had begun to happen that I did not arrange and could not have stopped and did not, I confess, entirely regret. Some producer, somewhere, needed footage to run under the breaking news, and reached, as they do, for the most recent tape of the man in the headline, and found an interview from a while back, and cut to it. So Vance's own face appeared beneath the words of his own ruin, saying, in his smooth, confident voice, with the old date stamped in the corner, that the Thorne era was ending. They found the clip quickly. They always do. These things travel faster when the person who said them needs them not to. I watched a little of it, later, without any satisfaction I could locate, and mostly what I felt was the mild professional interest of a man seeing a long calculation come out to the number he had written down at the start. I was not in any of those rooms. I want that on the record one last time, because it is the whole architecture of what I am. I did not deliver the notice, I did not empty the chair, I did not cut the clip. My lawyers filed the case, and every single piece of evidence in it had been produced, signed, sent, or spoken by Arthur Vance himself, across 3 years, under his own hand and his own authority, believing the entire time that he was winning. The notice was filed at 9. Stella called to confirm at 7 minutes past. I was already sitting down when she called. I said thank you. I had a cup of coffee. It was exactly the right strength. She had made it before she left. I was sitting down because I was in the last room, the one this whole thing had been walking toward for 3 years, waiting for the one person left who did not yet know how it ended. It was not a grand room. A table, 2 chairs, a plain manila envelope on the table between them, and a door, standing open, that had been open before either of us arrived, because I had opened it myself and left it that way, and I had my reasons, and she would understand them soon enough. Eliza came in. She saw me sitting there, and she saw the envelope, and something in the set of the room told her before I said a word that the long private weather of the last 3 years had finally arrived over the both of us at once. She sat down across from me. She looked at the envelope. She looked at me. I nodded toward it. That was all. I did not say open it. She opened it. She read. I watched her read, the way I have watched her do most things, without hurry, without helping. She read her own name, her own signatures at the foot of transmission after transmission, dated in her own confident hand, each one logged and locked the instant she had sent it, none of which she had ever known was being kept. She turned a page and read the words stamped across the header of everything she had ever carried out of my house. Fabricated. Source document. She read a message thread, Her handler's careful courtesy and Vance's clinical replies, the whole shape of the thing she had served laid flat on a table. And she read a date near the end, a recent one, beside a single, cold word. Bankrupt. She did not look up for a long time. I let her have the time. It was the last thing of mine I had left to give her, and it cost me nothing, and I have never been stingy with the things that cost me nothing. When she did look up, I was already looking at her. There was no anger in my face. I had spent whatever anger I might have had a very long time ago, quietly, alone, years before, and had put the space it left to more productive use. There was no triumph either. I want to be honest about that. A man who has waited 3 years for a thing does not feel triumph when it arrives. He feels the particular emptiness of a room after the furniture has been carried out. All the documents you transmitted were fabrications, I said. He's already bankrupt. She said nothing. There was nothing to say, and she was, whatever else she was, too intelligent to reach for the small lies people reach for at moments like this. She simply looked at me, holding a packet that had unmade 3 years of her life, and waited to see what a man does at the end, when he finally has the person who wronged him sitting across a table with nowhere left to go. The Artman is paid, I said. 3 years forward. You earned it. And that was all I said. I did not explain it, I did not soften it or sharpen it. I have thought a great deal since about why that was the cruelest thing I could have done, and the kindest, and how it managed to be both at once. If I had shouted, she would have had something to push against. If I had punished her, she could have paid and been, in some small accounting, free. Instead, I paid her. I closed the debt from my side, cleanly, and asked for nothing. Not an apology, not an explanation, not even the sight of her face changing. There is no reply to that. It takes the reply away. It leaves a person alone in a room with only themselves, which is the one place none of us can bear to be, and the one place I had decided, a long time ago, she would have to go by herself. That is the whole of what I know about how to end a betrayal, and it took me most of a life and one earlier ruin to learn it. You do not punish. Punishment is a conversation. And a conversation is a mercy, because it means the other person still has a part left to play. You pay what is owed. You close the door. You take away the reply. What is left is not your judgment of them, and so they cannot argue with it. What is left is only themselves, and their own account, and the very long time they will have to sit with it. I could not have handed her a heavier thing if I had worked at it for another 3 years. I did not have to. I simply refused, at the end, to give her the fight that would have let her off. The receipt was in her pocket. She did not take it out. Not yet. She sat with the packet in her hands and the open door at her back, and the whole of it settled over her without a single word, the way the true things always arrive, in silence, having taken the long way round. Then she stood. She reached into the packet and she took one thing out of it, and only one. The lease. The paid apartment, 3 years forward, in her name. She left everything else on the table. The signatures, the fabrication label, the message thread, the bankruptcy date, all the proof of what she had been and what it had been worth. She did not want the proof. No one ever wants the proof. She took the one page that said someone had decided she was owed a roof, and she held it. She looked at me one last time. I was already looking at her, the same as before. No anger, no grief, no request. A man on his own side of an open door. And she found, I think, that there was nothing in my face to answer, because I had arranged, over 3 careful years, to have nothing left to say to her that a table full of paper had not already said better. She turned, and she walked to the door that had been open the whole time, and she went through it, and she did not look back. And as she went, I saw that the receipt was in her hand. She had taken it out of her pocket at some point without knowing she had, the way her hand had reached for it once before, over the memo, months ago, doing the true thing while the rest of her looked away. She was holding the lease in one hand and the receipt in the other. The lease she had somewhere to put. The receipt she did not, and never would. And I think she understood, walking out, that she was going to be carrying that weightless thing for a very long time, with nowhere in the world to set it down. I have wondered, since, whether that was a mercy or its opposite. the receipt in her hand. I have decided it was neither. It was simply true, the way a bill is true. She had been given exactly one thing in 3 years that asked nothing of her, and she had not been able to put it down then, and she could not put it down now. That is not a punishment I invented. It is only what a kindness becomes, when the person who receives it spends the whole time it is being given betraying the one who gave it. The receipt never weighed anything. That was always going to be the heaviest part of it. I did not follow her. I did not close the door. I did not stand. I stayed where I was, on my side of it, in the quiet, and I let the room be a room again. Across her empty chair, the open door showed an ordinary hallway and an ordinary morning. Somewhere out in it, a man was sitting very still at a desk beside a capped pen, and a chair in a boardroom stayed empty. None of it needed me anymore, and I found at last that I did not need any of it either. The chair across from me was empty, the door was open, and that, after 3 years, was the end of it, and I had nothing left to do, and for the first time in a very long time, that was not a loss.